The fluorescent lights in the blood donation centre flickered twice before stabilising, casting their pale glow across the rows of vinyl chairs where donors sat with their arms extended, tubes trailing from the crooks of their elbows into collection bags. I had been here 3 hours ago. I was not supposed to be here again. The woman at the front desk had looked at my chart and shaken her head, her lips pressed into a thin line of professional concern. "You donated this morning," she said. "You can't donate again for at least 8 weeks. Your iron levels." But then her phone had rung, and her face had changed, and now I was sitting in this chair again, my sleeve rolled up, watching my blood flow into a bag marked urgent. The child was 7 years old. I did not know her name. I did not know whose daughter she was. I only knew that she had been in an accident, that she was bleeding internally, that she had a blood type so rare it affected less than 1% of the population, and that I was the only registered donor within 100 miles who matched. The nurse who inserted the needle into my vein had hesitated. "You understand this is dangerous," she said quietly, so the other donors wouldn't hear. "You're already depleted. This could cause serious complications." I told her I understood. I told her to proceed. She did not argue further. There was a child dying somewhere in this building, and arguments seemed small against that fact. I worked in the hospital cafeteria. 3 years now. I arrived at 5 in the morning to help prepare breakfast for the patients, then stayed through the lunch rush, then cleaned the kitchen until 3 in the afternoon. It was not glamorous work. It was not even particularly skilled work. But it was steady, and it paid enough to cover the rent on my studio apartment, and it allowed me to be invisible in a way I had come to appreciate. People did not notice cafeteria workers. They looked through us, past us, their eyes fixed, on their phones or their conversations or their own anxieties. I had learned to find comfort in that invisibility. It meant no one asked questions I did not want to answer. It meant no one looked too closely at the scars on my wrists that were not from any attempt to end my life, but from something worse, from hands that had held me down, from wire that had cut into my skin, from a marriage that had been a prison, before I finally broke free. The blood bag was filling slowly. I kept my eyes on the ceiling, counting the water stains, trying to ignore the lightheadedness that was creeping in at the edges of my vision. The morning donation had been routine. I donated every 8 weeks, regular as clockwork, because blood was something I could give freely, something that cost me nothing I wasn't willing to lose. My mother had needed transfusions during her final months. The cancer had eaten through her so quickly that she seemed to shrink before my eyes, her skin turning paper thin, her voice fading to a whisper. She had died waiting for blood that never came. I was 19. I had been donating ever since. A commotion at the entrance made me turn my head. 2 men in dark suits had entered the donation centre, their presence immediately wrong in this space of soft voices and medical routine. They were scanning the room with the sharp, assessing gaze of people who were used to controlling their environments. One of them spoke to the woman at the front desk. She pointed in my direction. Both men turned to look at me. I looked away. Whatever they wanted, it was not my concern. I had learned long ago to make myself small, to avoid drawing attention, to let the world's troubles flow around me like water around a stone. But they were walking toward me now, their footsteps heavy on the linoleum floor, and the nurse attending to me had frozen with her hand on the blood bag. "Miss," one of the men said. He had a voice like gravel, low and rough. "We need to speak with you." "I'm in the middle of a donation," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Whatever it is can wait." "It cannot." The second man stepped closer. He was younger than the first, with a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so cold. "You're donating blood for a specific patient. We need to know how you came to be registered as a match." I blinked at him. "I don't understand the question. I'm in the hospital's donor registry. I've been donating here for 3 years. Someone needed my blood type. I happen to be the only match." I paused. "Who are you?" The men exchanged a glance. Neither of them answered. The nurse cleared her throat. "Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to step back. This donor is already compromised. She donated this morning and should not be donating again. I need to monitor her carefully." "Compromised?" The older man's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, compromised?" "I mean she's giving blood she doesn't have to spare." Nurse's voice was sharper now, protective. "I mean this donation could put her in the hospital herself. I mean whatever your interest in this situation is, it needs to wait until I'm certain this woman isn't going to collapse." I watched this exchange with a detached curiosity. The men were clearly not medical staff. They were clearly not family of the child. Their concern was not the frantic, desperate concern of parents watching their daughter die. They were something else entirely, something that made the hair on the back of my neck rise in a warning I had learned to trust. "The donation is almost complete," I said. "Then you can ask me whatever you want." The older man studied me for a long moment. Whatever he saw in my face seemed to satisfy him, because he nodded once and stepped back. "We'll wait." They did not leave. They stood against the far wall, arms crossed, watching me with the patient attention of predators who had cornered their prey and knew there was no escape. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing, on the slow pull of blood leaving my body, on the child somewhere in this hospital whose life depended on this bag filling drop by drop. When the nurse finally removed the needle and pressed gauze to my arm, I felt hollowed out, scraped clean, as if something essential had been drained along with the blood. She made me sit for 20 minutes with my arm elevated, pressing juice and cookies on me that I ate mechanically, without tasting. The men watched the entire time. They did not speak. They did not check their phones. They simply watched. "You need to rest," the nurse said when she finally cleared me to leave. "Go home, eat red meat, sleep. If you feel dizzy or nauseous, come back immediately." I nodded and stood. The room tilted slightly before stabilizing. I gripped the back of the chair until my knuckles went white, then released it and walked toward the door with careful, measured steps. The men fell into step on either side of me. "I'm going home," I said without looking at them. "Whatever you want to discuss can happen while I walk to the bus stop." "You're not taking the bus." The younger man's hand closed around my elbow, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make his meaning clear. "There's a car waiting. Someone wants to meet you." I stopped walking. The hallway was busy. Nurses and orderlies and visitors flowing around us, everyone too absorbed in their own emergencies to notice the small drama unfolding in their midst. I could scream. I could cause a scene. But something in me, some instinct honed by years of surviving situations I should not have survived, told me that screaming would make things worse. "Who wants to meet me?" I asked. "The girl's father." I processed this information slowly. The girl, the child who had needed my blood. Her father wanted to meet me. That was reasonable, wasn't it? A father whose daughter had nearly died would want to thank the person who saved her. This could be a simple expression of gratitude, except simple gratitude did not require two men in dark suits to escort the blood donor to a waiting car. "All right," I said. "Take me to him." The car was black, sleek, expensive in a way that spoke of wealth beyond anything I could imagine. The interior smelled of leather and something faintly spicy, a cologne perhaps, or an air freshener designed to mimic one. I sat in the back seat with my hands folded in my lap, watching the city slide past the tinted windows. Neither of the men spoke. The driver navigated traffic with silent efficiency, weaving through the evening rush as if the other cars were obstacles in a video game. We did not go to the hospital administrator's office, which is where I had expected to be taken. We did not go to a nearby restaurant or coffee shop, which would have been the normal choice for an informal meeting. Instead, we drove for 30 minutes, leaving the city centre behind, passing through neighbourhoods I did not recognise until we reached an area of gated estates and manicured lawns that seemed to belong to a different world entirely. The car stopped at a pair of iron gates that swung open without any visible signal. We drove up a long, curving driveway lined with oak trees, their branches bare in the late autumn chill. The house that emerged from the darkness was enormous. 3 stories of stone and glass, lit from within by a warm golden glow that made it look almost welcoming. Almost. "This way," the older man said as he opened my door. I stepped out of the car and felt the cold immediately biting through my thin jacket, making me shiver. I had not dressed for a visit to an estate. I had dressed for a day of serving institutional meals in a hospital basement. My clothes smelled of grease and industrial cleaner. My hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. I was not the kind of woman who belonged in places like this, but I walked forward anyway because there was no point in protesting, and because somewhere in this house was a man who wanted to meet me, and I had learned long ago that running from powerful men only made them chase harder. The interior of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. High ceilings, gleaming hardwood floors, artwork on the walls that I suspected cost more than I would earn in a lifetime. A woman in a crisp black uniform took my jacket and disappeared with it, leaving me standing in the foyer in my stained work clothes, feeling more out of place than I had ever felt in my life. "Mr. Moretti will see you in his study," the younger man said. "This way." Moretti. The name tugged at something in my memory, some half-heard rumour or whispered conversation in the hospital break room. I could not place it. I followed the man down a long hallway, past closed doors and silent rooms, until we reached a set of double doors at the end. He knocked once, waited for a muffled response, then opened the doors, and gestured for me to enter. The study was smaller than I expected, almost intimate. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked like they had actually been read rather than simply displayed. A fire burned in a stone fireplace, casting flickering shadows across the room. 2 leather chairs faced each other before the fire, and in one of them sat a man. He stood as I entered. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes the colour of winter ice. He was not handsome in any conventional sense. His features were too sharp, too severe, his expression too controlled to invite warmth. But there was something about him, some quality of presence that made the air in the room feel heavier, more charged. He looked at me as if he could see through my skin to the bones beneath. "Leave us," he said to the man who had escorted me. His voice was low, measured, without inflection. The door closed behind me. I was alone with him. "Please," he said, gesturing to the empty chair. "Sit." I sat. My legs were grateful for the relief. The double donation had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. He did not sit. He walked to a side table where a crystal decanter held some amber liquid, poured 2 glasses, and brought one to me. "Drink," he said. "You look like you're about to faint." "I don't drink," I said. It was a lie. I simply did not drink in the homes of strange men who sent armed escorts to collect me. "It's whiskey. It will help with the blood loss." He set the glass on the small table beside my chair. "Drink it or don't. The choice is yours." He settled into the chair across from me, his own glass cradled in his hand, and studied me with that penetrating gaze. I studied him back. Up close, I could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the careful control that held his body so still. This was a man who had been afraid. Recently. This was a man who was still afraid. "My daughter," he said finally. "Lucia. She was in a car accident this morning. The doctors said she would die without a transfusion. Her blood type..." He paused, took a breath. "Her blood type is very rare. There was no supply in the hospital's blood bank. They searched the donor registry and found only 1 match within driving distance." "Me," I said. "You." He took a sip of his whiskey. "They called the number on your file. You were at work, in the hospital cafeteria. Within 15 minutes, you were in the donation centre giving blood you had already given once today." I said nothing. There was nothing to say. The doctors told me what you did, he continued. They told me you had donated this morning, that your iron levels were already low, that giving more blood could cause serious harm. They told me you did it anyway. There was a child dying, I said. What else was I supposed to do? Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Most people would have refused. Most people would have cited medical advice, liability concerns, personal risk. Most people would have found a reason to say no. I am not most people. No. He set his glass down and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes never leaving my face. You are not. Which is why I need to understand who you are. A cafeteria worker who donates blood religiously, who lives alone in a studio apartment, who has no family, no close friends, no social media presence, no digital footprint beyond the bare minimum required to exist in the modern world. A woman who has been invisible for 3 years. A woman whose background before arriving in this city is, he paused, remarkably difficult to trace. I felt the blood drain from my face. You investigated me. My daughter nearly died. The only person who could save her was a stranger with no past. Yes, I investigated you. I should have been angry. I should have been outraged at this invasion of my privacy, this violation of boundaries I had worked so hard to maintain. But anger requires energy, and I had none left. I was empty, scraped clean, and this man's cold efficiency was simply one more thing I did not have the strength to fight. What do you want to know? I asked. Everything. He picked up his glass again, swirled the amber liquid, watched the firelight play through it. But I suspect you won't tell me everything. So let's start with the simple questions. What is your real name? The name on my hospital badge is accurate. Your badge says Elena Santos. Is that the name you were born with? I hesitated. The truth sat heavy in my chest, a weight I had carried for 3 years, a secret I had guarded with every ounce of strength I possessed. But this man had resources I could not begin to match. If he wanted to find out who I had been, he would find out eventually. The only question was whether I controlled the I, telling or let him piece it together from records and rumours. No, I said. It is not. Then what is? That is not a simple question. I looked into the fire, watching the flames dance and twist. The woman I was born as no longer exists. She died 3 years ago in a house fire that killed no one but destroyed everything she had been. Elena Santos was born from her ashes. She is the only version of me that matters now. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was slightly softer than before. Who killed the woman you were? Her husband. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I did not elaborate. I did not need to. Men like him understood violence, understood power, understood the ways the strong could crush the weak without ever leaving visible marks. And the husband? He asked. Believes I am dead. Believes I burned with the house he set on fire to punish me for trying to leave. I finally looked at him. I would very much like to keep it that way. He nodded slowly, as if filing this information away for later consideration. You saved my daughter's life today. You risked your own health, possibly your own life, to save a child you had never met. I do not forget debts like that. I did not do it for a debt. I did not do it for anything. I did it because there was a child dying, and I was the only one who could help. I know. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the darkness beyond the glass. That is exactly why I cannot let you walk out of here and disappear back into your invisible life. My heart stuttered. What do you mean? I mean that you are, as of this moment, under my protection. He turned to face me, and his expression was as cold and certain as stone. Whatever you were running from, whoever you were hiding from, they will never find you. Anyone who tries will answer to me. I don't need protection, I said. I have survived 3 years on my own. I can survive 3 more. You can survive. he agreed. But you should not have to. You saved my daughter. The least I can do is ensure you never have to look over your shoulder again. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that I had not asked for this, that I did not want to be indebted to a man whose name made hospital staff go pale, whose eyes held the calm certainty of someone who had killed and would kill again without hesitation. But I was tired. So tired. And the chair was soft, and the fire was warm, and for the first time in 3 years, someone was offering me something I had not dared to want. "What exactly are you offering?" I asked. "A job," he said. "Here, in my household. Better pay than the cafeteria, better hours, better conditions. A room of your own if you want it. Security staff who will ensure no one from your past can get close to you. And when Lucia is recovered, the chance to meet the woman who saved her life." I considered this. The smart thing would be to refuse, to thank him for his gratitude and walk out the door and disappear into another city, another identity, another 3 years of carefully constructed invisibility. But I was tired of running. I was tired of being invisible, and something in his offer, some note of sincerity beneath the cold efficiency, made me believe he meant what he said. "What kind of job?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "It does to me. I do not accept charity." A ghost of something that might have been respect crossed his face. "Household staff. Cooking, cleaning, whatever needs doing. You would report to my housekeeper, follow her instructions, work the hours she assigns. It would be real work, not a pretense. And if I say no? Then my driver will take you home, and you will never hear from me again." He paused. "But you will still have my gratitude and my protection, whether you want it or not. The debt I owe you cannot be repaid with a single offer." I thought of my studio apartment, its bare walls and narrow bed, its window that looked out onto a brick wall. I thought of the hospital cafeteria, its fluorescent lights and endless trays of institutional food. I thought of the years stretching ahead of me, each one identical to the last. A life lived in shades of grey. "I'll take the job," I said. He nodded as if he had expected nothing else. "Good. My housekeeper will show you to your room. We can discuss the details tomorrow." I stood and the room tilted again, and I had to grip the arm of the chair to keep from falling. He was beside me in an instant, his hand on my elbow, steadying me with surprising gentleness. "You should not have given so much blood," he said quietly. "There was a child dying," I said again. What else was I supposed to do? He did not answer. He simply guided me to the door, opened it, and handed me over to the waiting housekeeper with instructions to ensure I ate, rested, and received whatever medical attention I needed. Then he was gone, and I was being led down unfamiliar hallways to an unfamiliar room, and the world was spinning softly at the edges of my vision. The room they gave me was larger than my entire apartment, a bed with actual pillows, not the flat, sad things I had bought at the discount store, a window that looked out onto the moonlit grounds, a bathroom with a tub deep enough to sink into. I stood in the doorway and tried to make sense of the sudden shift in my circumstances, but sense would not come. I had woken up this morning in my narrow bed, eaten my bowl of instant oatmeal, walked to the bus stop in the grey dawn light, and now I was standing in a mansion, owned by a man whose name made people afraid. The housekeeper, a small efficient woman named Mrs. Chen, brought me soup and bread and a glass of orange juice. She watched me eat every bite, then helped me out of my work clothes and into a soft cotton nightgown that someone had laid out on the bed. "Sleep," she said. "Mr. Moretti has arranged for a doctor to check on you in the morning. You are not to leave this room until then." I did not argue. I crawled into the bed, pulled the covers up to my chin, and let the darkness take me. I dreamed of fire. I dreamed of my husband's hands around my throat, his voice in my ear telling me I would never leave, never escape, never be anything but his. I dreamed of smoke filling my lungs, of heat searing my skin, of the moment I realized I was going to die and the strange peace that came with that realization. And then I dreamed of waking up in a hospital bed, bandaged and broken, being told by a sympathetic nurse that my house had burned down with me inside it, that my husband believed I was dead, that I had a choice. I could come forward and face him, or I could disappear and build a new life somewhere he would never find me. I chose to disappear. I chose Elena Santos. I chose 3 years of invisibility, of keeping my head down, of being no one important to anyone. And now, somehow, I had ended up here, in the home of a man who saw everything and forgot nothing, under the protection of someone whose power I could not begin to understand. The doctor who examined me in the morning was professionally concerned. My iron levels were dangerously low. My blood pressure was unstable. I was to rest for at least a week, eat iron-rich foods, and avoid any strenuous activity. Mr. Moretti listened to this diagnosis with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "She will have whatever she needs," he said when the doctor finished. "I expect daily updates on her condition." "Of course, Mr. Moretti." The doctor left. I sat up in bed, feeling stronger than I had the night before, but still fragile, still hollow. Mr. Moretti remained standing by the door, watching me with those ice-grey eyes. "Your daughter," I said. "Lucia. How is she?" Something shifted in his face, a softening that was there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Stable. The transfusion worked. She will need time to recover, but the doctors are optimistic." Good. I meant it. Whatever else was happening, whatever strange new world I had fallen into, a child was alive who might have died. That was enough. "She is asking to meet you," he said. "When you are both stronger. She wants to thank the person who saved her." "I didn't save her. The doctors saved her. The blood saved her. I struggled to find the right words. I just happened to be the one who had it." "You happened to be the one willing to give it." He moved closer, pulled a chair to the side of the bed, sat down. This close, I could see the exhaustion in his face more clearly, the deep lines of worry that had been carved over hours of waiting to see if his daughter would live or die. "I have spent the night thinking about what you did, the risk you took, the complete lack of hesitation." "It wasn't courage," I said. "It was just, there wasn't another option. Not really." "There are always other options. Most people take them." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. We sat in silence for a moment, the morning light streaming through the window, dust motes dancing in the golden air. "You will stay here until you are fully recovered," he said finally. "Then we will discuss your role in the household. Mrs. Chen will provide you with clothing, toiletries, whatever you need. If you require anything else, ask, and it will be provided. I don't need much. I know." He stood, looked down at me with an expression I could not read. "That is precisely why you will be given more than you need. Rest now. We will speak again soon." He left without waiting for my response. I stared at the closed door for a long moment, then lay back against the pillows and closed my eyes. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of rest and recovery. Mrs. Chen brought me meals, monitored my medication, checked my temperature and blood pressure with the efficiency of someone who had nursed many people back to health. She did not ask questions about my past. She did not comment on the scars on my wrists or the way I flinched at sudden noises. She simply did her job, quietly and competently, and I was grateful for her discretion. I saw Mr. Moretti twice during that first week. Once he appeared at my door with a stack of books, novels, poetry, history, that he left on the nightstand without explanation. Once I saw him walking in the garden below my window, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice too low to hear. Both times I felt that strange awareness, that prickling sense of being observed even when I could not see him watching. On the 8th day, Mrs. Chen helped me dress in clothes that fit better than anything I had owned in years. Simple but well made, the kind of quality that whispers rather than shouts. and led me downstairs to the breakfast room. Lucia was waiting for me. She was small for her age, with her father's dark hair and her mother's brown eyes. She was pale from her time in the hospital, thin from not eating, but there was a brightness in her face that nothing could dim. She looked at me with open curiosity, no trace of the wariness or calculation that marked her father's gaze. "You're the lady who gave me blood," she said. "Yes." "Does it hurt when they take it out?" "A little, like a pinch." She nodded solemnly. I was scared. In the hospital, everything hurt, and there were so many doctors and they kept poking me with needles. She paused. "But then they said someone gave me blood, and it was going to help me get better. They said you were very brave." I sat down across from her, at the table where Mrs. Chen had set out breakfast for two. "I wasn't brave. I searched for words that a 7-year-old would understand. I was just in the right place at the right time. Daddy says you saved my life." She picked up a piece of toast and bit into it. "He says I have to be very polite to you and say thank you properly. You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad you're okay." She chewed thoughtfully, watching me with those bright, curious eyes. "Are you going to live with us now? Mrs. Chen said you're going to work here." "I think so." "Yes." "Good." She smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. "I like you. You have a nice face. Not scary like Daddy's friends." I could not help it. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in longer than I could remember. From the doorway, Mr. Moretti watched us. I did not know how long he had been there. His face was as unreadable as ever, but something in his posture had shifted. Some tension had eased. He looked at his daughter with an expression that was almost soft. "Lucia," he said, "let the lady eat her breakfast. You can talk to her later." "But Daddy—" "Later." His tone brooked no argument. She sighed dramatically but obeyed, sliding out of her chair and running to him. He bent down to kiss the top of her head, murmured something I could not hear, then straightened and met my eyes over her dark hair. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for making her smile." Then he was gone, taking Lucia with him, and I was alone with my breakfast and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of being somewhere I might, possibly, belong. My duties in the household were simple at first. Mrs. Chen assigned me to help in the kitchen, preparing meals under the supervision of the head cook, a taciturn man named Paolo, who communicated mostly in grunts and gestures but whose food was extraordinary. I learned to chop vegetables precisely, to season meat properly, to time dishes so that everything arrived at the table hot and fresh. It was not so different from the cafeteria work, but the ingredients were better, the pace less frantic, the atmosphere somehow calmer despite the constant undercurrent of tension that ran through the entire household. I learned in bits and pieces who Mr. Moretti was. I learned it from the way the staff spoke his name, never casually, always with a note of respect that bordered on fear. I learned it from the visitors who came to the house late at night, hard-faced men in expensive suits who spoke in low voices and left with sealed envelopes. I learned it from Mrs. Chen, who warned me never to enter the East Wing after dark, never to mention what I saw or heard, never to ask questions I did not want answered. He was a criminal. The word felt too small, too pedestrian for what he was. He was the kind of criminal who shaped cities, who moved through the world like a shark through dark water, who made people disappear and economies shift and governments look the other way. I should have been terrified. I should have run the moment I understood what kind of man I had entangled myself with. But I had survived worse than criminals. I had survived a man who loved me, who had promised to cherish me, who had turned that love into a weapon and wielded it with such precision that I had nearly died believing I deserved everything he did to me. Mr. Moretti was dangerous, but his danger was honest. He did not pretend to be anything other than what he was. There was a strange kind of safety in that. Weeks passed. My iron levels returned to normal. The hollowness in my chest filled in, slowly, with something that might have been contentment. I settled into the rhythm of the household, learned the names of the staff, found my place in the intricate machinery of Mr. Moretti's world. Lucia attached herself to me with the fierce devotion of a child who had almost died and was determined to hold tight to everyone who had helped her survive. She appeared in the kitchen while I was working, sat on a stool in the corner and chatted about her lessons, her toys, the books she was reading. She followed me through the house on my cleaning days, asking endless questions about everything. Why did I fold towels that way? How did I make the mirrors so shiny? What was my favorite color? Did I have a favorite animal? Had I ever been on an airplane? I answered when I could, deflected when I could not, and slowly, without meaning to, I let myself care for her. Her father noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything. "She is very fond of you," he said one evening, appearing in the kitchen doorway as I was finishing the dinner preparations. Paolo had gone home, the other staff had dispersed. I was alone with the cooling ovens and the faint smell of roasted chicken. "She is a lovely child," I said carefully. "Very bright, very curious." Her mother died when she was 4. He moved into the kitchen, leaned against the counter, watched me with those unreadable eyes. She does not remember her, but she has been, searching, I think, for someone to fill that space. I stopped what I was doing, looked at him. I am not trying to replace her mother. I know. He was quiet for a moment. But you should know that she sees you that way. Or could. If you stay. If I stay. You are not a prisoner here. You can leave whenever you wish. I told you that the first night. He pushed off from the counter, moved closer. But if you do stay, if you choose to make this your home, I need to know that you understand what that means. For Lucia. For me. I thought about the studio apartment I had left behind, its bare walls and lonely silence. I thought about the cafeteria, its fluorescent lights and anonymous faces. I thought about the life I had been living, the half-life, the survival without purpose. "I understand," I said. He nodded once, turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Tomorrow evening I am hosting a dinner, business associates. I would like you to be there." In the kitchen? At the table. He looked back at me and there was something in his expression that I could not name, something that made my heart beat faster despite my best efforts to remain calm. As my guest, before I could respond, he was gone. The dinner was an exercise in controlled tension. 8 men sat around a table that could have seated 20, their faces composed in expressions of careful neutrality, their eyes constantly moving, assessing, calculating. I sat at Mr. Moretti's right hand, wearing a dress that Mrs. Chen had procured from somewhere, black, simple, elegant, and tried to make myself as small and unnoticeable as possible. It did not work. Every man at that table looked at me at least once. Some looked longer than others. None of them asked who I was or why I was there. They simply acknowledged my presence with nods or brief smiles and returned their attention to the food, the wine, the careful dance of conversation. I understood by the end of the evening what my presence meant. I was a statement, a declaration. By seating me at his table, Mr. Moretti was claiming me in some way I did not fully understand, not as a possession exactly, but as something under his protection, something that touching would be costly. After the guests left, he found me in the library, where I had retreated to escape the lingering tension. I was standing by the window looking out at the moonlit garden, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "You did well," he said from the doorway. "I didn't do anything." "Exactly." He moved into the room, poured himself a drink from the decanter on the side table. "You were calm, composed. You did not flinch or stammer or try to ingratiate yourself. You simply existed, and by existing, you told them everything they needed to know." "What did I tell them?" He took a sip of his drink, considered the question. "That you are not afraid, that you cannot be easily intimidated, that anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first. I turned to face him. Why? Why what? Why are you doing this? Protecting me? Claiming me? I saved your daughter's life, yes, but this. I gestured at the room, the house, the invisible lines of power that radiated from him like heat from a flame. This is more than gratitude. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. When I received the call about Lucia, when I learned she was dying and there was nothing I could do, I felt something I had not felt in years. Helplessness. Complete, absolute helplessness. I have built an empire. I control more wealth and power than most people can imagine. But I could not save my own daughter. He set his glass down, moved closer. And then they told me about you, a woman I had never met, who worked in the hospital basement, who had given blood that morning and gave more anyway because my daughter needed it. A woman who risked her own life for a stranger. I had never felt gratitude like that. I had never felt... He paused, searching for the right word. Humbled like that. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. So yes, he continued, this is more than gratitude. I do not know exactly what it is. But I know that I cannot let anything happen to you. I know that when I look at you, I feel something I thought was gone from me forever. And I know that whatever you were running from, whoever you were hiding from, they will never touch you again. Not while I am alive. The air between us felt charged, electric. I wanted to step back, to put distance between us, but I could not move. I could only stand there looking into his ice-grey eyes, feeling the walls I had built around myself begin to crack. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. I don't know how to trust. I don't know how to let someone protect me. Then we will learn together. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. His hand touched my cheek, cupped my face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so controlled, so dangerous. There is no rush. There is no expectation. I only ask that you stay, that you give me the chance to prove I am not like whoever hurt you before. Closed my eyes. His hand was warm against my skin. He didn't just hurt me, I said. He tried to kill me. I know. His thumb traced the curve of my cheekbone. And I will kill him if he ever finds you. Slowly, without mercy. That is who I am. That is what I do. His voice softened. But with you, with Lucia, I want to be something more. I opened my eyes, looked at him, saw past the cold exterior to something vulnerable, something human, something that had been buried beneath layers of power and violence but still existed, still yearned for connection. Okay, I said. Okay? I'll stay. I'll give you the chance. He smiled then, just slightly, just the faintest curve of his lips. That is all I ask. He released me gently, stepped back, picked up his drink. The moment passed, but something had shifted between us. Some invisible barrier had fallen away. We were no longer protector and protected, employer and employee. We were something else, something unnamed, something that would take time to understand. Good night, he said. Good night. I watched him leave, then turned back to the window, to the moonlit garden, to the new life that was slowly, tentatively, beginning to take shape around me. The months that followed were a slow unfolding. Mr. Moretti, Dante, as he eventually asked me to call him when we were alone, did not press. He did not rush. He simply existed in my orbit, constant and steady, a presence I could rely on without fearing. We shared meals. We walked in the garden. We sat in the library in the evenings reading in companionable silence, the fire crackling between us. Lucia grew stronger, healthier, more attached to me with every passing day. She started calling me Lena instead of the lady, then simply, "You're here," when she saw me in the mornings, running to me with arms outstretched. I learned to hug her back, learned to let her climb into my lap and read to me, learn to smooth her hair and tell her stories and be something I had never expected to be. A mother figure, or close enough to one. Dante watched us together with an expression that grew softer each time. He did not interfere. He simply observed, and sometimes when Lucia had gone to bed and the house was quiet, he would find me and say things like, "She smiled at dinner because of you," or "She asked me if you could stay forever." Small things. Things that told me he saw what was happening, what we were becoming. The first time he kissed me, we had been walking in the garden after a late dinner. It was spring. The roses were blooming. The air smelled of flowers and new growth. I had said something, I cannot remember what, and he had laughed, a sound so rare that I stopped mid-stride to stare at him. "You laughed," I said. "You surprised me." "I didn't know you could laugh." He looked at me then, really looked, and something in his expression made my breath catch. "There are many things you do not know about me," he said. "I would like to show you, if you would let me." I nodded. He stepped closer. His hand cupped my face just as it had that night in the library months ago, but this time there was no hesitation, no question. His lips met mine, soft and warm and impossibly gentle, and I felt something inside me break open, not painfully, but like a flower unfurling, like ice melting, like coming home after a long, long journey. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath warm on my skin. "I have wanted to do that for a very long time," he said. "Why didn't you?" "Because you were not ready. Because I would never take anything from you that you were not willing to give." I kissed him again. He made a sound low in his throat, something between surprise and desire, and his arms came around me, holding me close, holding me like I was something precious, something worth protecting. We did not rush. Even after that first kiss, even after the line between us had been crossed, we moved, slowly, carefully. He understood, without being told, that I needed time. That my body held memories of other hands, cruel hands, hands that had taught me to expect pain instead of pleasure. He never pushed. He never asked for more than I was ready to give. And slowly, inch by inch, I learned to trust him, to trust touch, to trust myself. The past did not stay buried forever. I knew it wouldn't. I knew that the man I had fled, the man who believed I was dead, would eventually learn the truth. I knew that my careful invisibility could not last forever, but I allowed myself to hope that it would last long enough for Lucia to grow up, long enough for Dante and me to build something real, long enough for the woman I had become to be stronger than the woman I had been. The news came on a Tuesday afternoon. Dante called me into his study, his face grimmer than I had seen it in months. Mrs. Chen stood in the corner, her expression carefully blank. "There has been an inquiry," Dante said. "Someone has been asking questions about you, about Elena Santos." My blood ran cold. "Who?" "I do not know yet. My people are investigating." He moved around the desk, came to stand before me, took my hands in his. "I need you to tell me everything. About your husband, about what he did, about how you escaped. I need to know what I am dealing with." I told him. I told him about the courtship, the wedding, the slow descent into control and violence. I told him about the first time he hit me, the second time, the 100th time. I told him about the isolation, the manipulation, the way he had cut me off from everyone I loved until there was no one left who would notice if I disappeared. I told him about the night I tried to leave and the fire he set to punish me, and the miracle of waking up in a hospital bed instead of dying in flames. I told him about the choice I made to let him think I was dead, to become someone new, to run and keep running until I couldn't run anymore. When I finished, Dante's face was carved from stone. His hands, still holding mine, had tightened until his knuckles were white. "His name," he said. "Dante. His name," I told him. He released my hands, walked to the window, stood with his back to me. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "He will be found. He will be dealt with. You will never have to fear him again." "I don't want you to. I know what you want." He turned to face me, and his eyes were colder than I had ever seen them. "You want me to leave it alone, to let the law handle it, to trust that justice will be served." He moved closer, cupped my face in his hands, forced me to meet his gaze. "But the law did not protect you the first time. The law let him hurt you, control you, nearly kill you. I am not the law. I am something older, something more certain, and I will not let him touch you." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that revenge would not heal me, that violence would not undo what had been done. But I looked into his eyes and saw something I recognized, the same cold fury I had felt the night I watched my old life burn, the same determination to never be powerless again. "Be careful," I whispered. "Always." He kissed my forehead. "Now go to Lucia. She has been asking for you all day, and do not worry, this will be handled." He was right, of course, it was handled. I never knew the details. Dante did not share them, and I did not ask. But 3 weeks after that conversation, he came to me in the garden and told me it was over. My husband would never hurt anyone again. I was free. Truly free. I cried then. Not for the man who had been my husband, who had made my life a prison, but for the girl I had been before him, the girl who had believed in love and safety and happy endings. She had died long ago, but perhaps now something new could grow in the space she had left behind. Dante held me while I cried. He did not tell me it was okay, did not make empty promises, did not try to fix what could not be fixed. He simply held me, steady and strong, and let me grieve for everything I had lost. And when the tears finally stopped, when I looked up at him with swollen eyes and a raw heart, he smiled, that rare, precious smile, and said, "Now we begin." The years that followed were not perfect. There were dangers, setbacks, moments when the life Dante lived threatened to swallow us whole. There were enemies who saw me as a weakness, who tried to use me to hurt him. There were nights when he did not come home, when I lay awake wondering if this was the time his luck would finally run out. There were conversations with Lucia about who her father was, what he did, how to reconcile loving him with knowing the truth about his world. But there was also love. Real love, the kind I had stopped believing in. Quiet mornings in the garden, Lucia chasing butterflies while Dante and I drank coffee and watched. Evenings in the library, reading to each other, debating books and ideas and the nature of right and wrong. Nights in our bedroom, the room that had become ours, the bed that had become ours, where he taught me, slowly and gently, that touch could be tender, that intimacy could be safe, that my body was something to be cherished rather than controlled. Lucia grew. She became a teenager, then a young woman, fierce and smart and unafraid in ways I had never been at her age. She called me Mom for the first time when she was 13, casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I had to leave the room so she wouldn't see me cry. Dante changed too. Not his nature. He was still cold, still controlled, still capable of violence that would terrify most people. But he softened, around the edges. He learned to laugh more. He learned to delegate, to trust his people, to spend more time with his family, and less time building his empire. He told me once late at night that I had shown him what mattered. That before me he had been building power for power's sake. Now he was building safety, security, a world where the people he loved could live without fear. I never forgot what he was. I never pretended to be innocent of the life we lived. But I learned that morality was more complicated than I had believed, that good and evil were not always clear lines, that sometimes the most dangerous man in the room was also the safest place to rest. On the morning of our 10th anniversary, 10 years since the day I gave blood for a dying child and changed both our lives, Dante took me to the garden. The roses were blooming just like they had been the night of our first kiss. Lucia was away at university. The house was quiet. He handed me a single red rose. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For staying. For trusting me. For giving me a family I never thought I would have." He took my hands, looked into my eyes with that intense, unwavering gaze that still made my heart race after all these years. "I know I am not an easy man to love. I know this life is not what you would have chosen, but you chose it anyway. You chose us. And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful." I kissed him then, soft and slow, tasting the decade of love and trust we had built together. When we pulled apart, I was smiling. "I didn't choose this life," I said. "I chose you. The life came with it." I touched his face, traced the lines that had deepened with time. "And I would choose you again, every time." He pulled me close, held me against his chest, and we stood there in the garden surrounded by roses as the morning sun warmed us both. Somewhere in the house, a phone rang. One of his men called his name. The world was always demanding something from Dante Moretti. But for this moment, just this moment, he was only mine. And that was enough.